Good afternoon. It's great to see such a vibrant crowd here today to be part of a discussion on such an impactful issue to our great state. I'm Mike Voinovich, Chair of the CMC Board of Trustees and the Office Managing Partner of BDO. Today's Issue 3 debate continues CMC's political season, which is sponsored by Hannah News and Ohio Farm Bureau Federation. Please help me thank them for their support. Questions today will be submitted in writing. You will find a piece of paper in your forum flyer for this. Please include your name and your question. Members of CMC's program committee will begin to collect them about midway through the discussion. The best questions will be selected for content and relevance and read aloud by our program committee volunteers during our Q&A portion. So now let's get right to the program. Allow me to introduce our speakers. Representing Responsible Ohio and Yes on Issue 3 are Chris Stock and Ian James. Representing Ohioans Against Marijuana Monopolies and No on Issue 3 are Mike Curtin and Elizabeth Smith. And today we also have Bureau Chief of the Statehouse News Bureau, the host of the State of Ohio, Karen Kasler, who will be our moderator. We ask that our panelists defer to Karen's direction as our conversation proceeds. Karen, the stage is yours. Let us provide a warm welcome for all of our speakers.
Well, I'd say hi, everybody, but maybe that's not the best joke for this forum. We have a lot to get to, so I want to launch into it with a rundown of a couple of rules that we have here. Each side will have 1 minute to provide opening remarks and closing remarks, and we did a coin toss before this event, and Responsible Ohio will be going first, and Ohioans Against Marijuana Monopolies will be closing the conversation. I will start by asking questions. Questions could be to both sides or to individuals here. Rebuttals are permitted as directed by me, and I will try to give everybody equal time to answer questions. The only things that are timed, though, are going to be the opening and closing statements. Microphones, though, will be cut off if the speaking time goes on too long. I will give both sides warning, and we will keep the conversation moving. And again, each side will have 1 minute for closing arguments. That'll be after audience questions. So let me start right now with opening statements. And Responsible Ohio, you won the coin toss, so you have 1 minute to make your opening statements.
Thank you for having me today, and Chris and the rest of the panel. Since 1997, the Statehouse has refused to reform marijuana laws, and that's really fueled a failed marijuana industry. We spend $120 million every year to sustain this failure. In doing so, we turn a blind eye to people that are suffering. We don't provide the compassionate care that medical marijuana provides. Mike is going to, I'm sure, talk about the perspective. Our prospectus looks a lot better in color. We spend about $25 million at the end of this day to make sure that we're actually able to reform marijuana laws. The reason we're doing this is because, again, people are suffering. We have people that are consuming marijuana today. We're spending a lot of money to fail at enforcing marijuana. We're not providing health care to people that need it. We're not providing it to them at the price they can afford. And frankly, we're shackling people to their past, and we need to stop that. We need to provide people an opportunity to move forward.
Very good. 1 minute. And now let's go over to Ohioans Against Marijuana Monopolies. You have 1 minute for opening statements as well.
Thank you, Karen. State Issue 3 is a business plan. It is an investor-driven business plan in the form of a proposed amendment to our Ohio Constitution. It is an investor-driven plan to maximize profits by creating a monopoly, cornering the market on a commodity. No one can truly understand Issue 3 without first having read the prospectus circulated throughout 2014 among potential investors. Issue 3 is a plan to maximize profits for 10 landowners by establishing marijuana retail stores in nearly every neighborhood of our state and by selling every type of marijuana product possible, including every type of edible and beverage. Investor-driven business plans to create economic exclusives have no place in our Ohio Constitution. Please join me in voting no on State Issue 3.
Again, excellent timing. Thank you. Now, before I get to my first questions, I want to kind of redefine what we're talking about with Issue 3 here. It's a constitutional amendment that would establish 10 official marijuana growing sites. It would legalize marijuana. Those growing sites would be owned by private investors. It would set up the opportunity for commercial sales via more than 1,100 local retail locations to be approved by local voters. A separate nonprofit medical marijuana program, licenses for individuals over the age of 21 to grow up to 4 plants in their homes, and also a tax situation here, 15% tax on gross revenue at the growing and manufacturing sites, 5% on gross revenue at the retail locations, and 55% of that would go to local governments, 30% to counties, 15% to the state. For administration, there would also be a commission that would oversee all this. Issue 2, the so-called anti-monopoly amendment. It would prevent economic monopolies from becoming part of the state constitution. That's a related issue, but we're going to stick with Issue 3 here in this debate, though I'm sure Issue 2 will come up. So I want to start our discussion here with a question to Mike and Elizabeth. Ian James has said that people are buying marijuana today, and you cannot be safer when you do not regulate. So what is wrong with that statement? Are we safer without legalized regulated marijuana, or will legalized regulated marijuana make us less safe?
You want to take it? Legalized marijuana is an open door to experimentation. If Ohio approves Issue 3, we would go from 0 to 100 in 10 seconds. We would catapult Ohio to the absolute bleeding edge of experimentation with marijuana being available in every neighborhood of our state. No one believes that we'd have fewer problems with this type of rampant promotion of a drug. What you promote, you get more of. What you don't promote, you get less of. This is a profit maximization plan designed to sell as much marijuana as possible to as many people as possible, 24/7, all over the state.
Would you like to respond?
Sure, I'll respond. Again, thanks for having me on, Representative Curtin, Elizabeth Smith. I guess the two words that sort of stuck in my craw as Representative Curtin was talking about this dystopian future in which there is marijuana on every corner is rampant promotion of the drug. And, whether Issue 3 passes or Issue 3 fails, there will still be rampant promotion of the drug, right? I mean, everybody in here understands that marijuana is being sold across the state of Ohio. It's being sold across the nation. So rather than sticking our heads in the sand on this side, we decided to take a public policy look at this and figure out, okay, what are the harms that marijuana does? And if the harms are not commensurate with the cost, let's figure out a way to regulate this, to tax it, to legalize it so that we can bring revenue into our state and distribute that revenue to the state. That's what this is about.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to keep you all on equal time here. So my next question is for you folks over here with Responsible Ohio. You could have tried to just legalize medical marijuana, but you've said you learned from other states that to fully regulate marijuana, you felt that you had to go for medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. But you've created a long and complex amendment that has left some voters confused, and that's even without Issue 2 being factored into it. So I'm wondering, was that deliberate? Are you hoping people will focus either on the medical marijuana part or on the legalization part and not really look at the big benefits to investors that are in this and not look at the possible pitfalls that are in this?
Well, Karen, that question started in one place and then kind of went in a different place. Let me see if I can answer both of them. The initial question was why medical? Why are you doing both? Why not just do medical? And from a public policy perspective, it's because we learned our lesson, right? If you look at what happened in California, if you look at what happened in Colorado, you see that when they legalized only medical, and you're also going to see this in a few other states as their experiments get rolling, you see that they have had problems ensuring that it stays medical for patients who need it. And so what we said is instead of this fig leaf approach, instead of this wink and a nod medical system, we are going to get our arms around the entire industry. We're going to regulate it from top to bottom, and we're going to ensure that to the extent this is medicine for real people, like the Bentons in Colorado or like the Nazarenes here, that they're getting real medicine, and it's not a wink and a nod for some folks who want to use it for personal use. We're giving them the opportunity to have a fully realized tax base.
But you recognize that it's a complex amendment, and a lot of people are confused by it.
It's a $2.5 billion industry. It's a complex industry that needs some significant regulation. And I'll tell you, there would be no need for this amendment if the General Assembly would have acted and would have put a medical bill in place. And Representative Curtin will remember that I said that to him as we were debating issue 2 in the chamber across the street. I said, Representative Curtin, if you really want to destroy issue 3, all you need to do is put a medical marijuana bill on and help these families in need. That will kill issue 3, not issue 2.
Or just pass the bill that's actually there right now, House Bill 33. Just do that.
Well, I want to give the other side about 2 minutes to respond.
There is the crux of the matter, real medicine for real people. That is not what this amendment is about. And that's extremely important to understand that in this proposed constitutional amendment, there is no mandate for medical marijuana. We do know that the proposed amendment does say that there can be up to 1,100 retail stores. That's retail stores for recreational use. It does not specify the number of medical dispensaries. Again, real medicine, why are all these medical professionals against issue 3? Because the science is not there. It has not yet been determined that in fact it is real medicine. We need to let the science do its work. We are not scientists. We need to let the scientific method figure out whether in fact it does help. We've seen the ads on TV. We've seen the heartstrings being pulled. All of us are sympathetic to people who feel that it can do something for them. But you're seeing the extreme examples. Again, the medical professionals will tell you that it is not yet ready. And I ask you, how will your family doctor know how to certify this for you? There will not be the pamphlet-length warnings that we see even on our Tylenol bottles. You won't see that because it won't, frankly, be to the benefit of these wealthy investors who have come up with their own regulatory scheme.
I want to give Representative Curtin a chance to respond to the whole question about, couldn't the legislature have done something about this?
Sure, the legislature could have done something about it, but I think that Attorney Smith makes the salient point here. This is developing slowly through real research, real medicine. Clinical trials are underway in our country. They've been underway for 2 years. Nationwide Children's Hospital has experts. Cincinnati Children's Hospital has experts who are collaborating on these studies. And this is very, very complex stuff when you get into cannabis-based medicines. We are making progress. We're making it incrementally, but the jury is out as to where it's beneficial and where it's not beneficial. And real medicine will determine where we go.
All right, let's move on to the next question. I want to ask this to Ohioans against marijuana monopolies. The measure allows for anyone over the age of 21 in Ohio to buy a license to grow up to 4 plants in his or her home. Kurt Steiner with Ohioans Against Marijuana Monopolies has even said this, saying that every Ohio couple could have more than a pound of dope in their house legally. He was trying to make the point that it could be sold on the black market. I want to ask you, though, how is this a monopoly when you have millions of people who could potentially grow marijuana in their homes?
Well, that is not the test for a monopoly, because those people who are buying it in their homes will have to buy it from the designated suppliers, those who are have the designated parcels in this proposed amendment to grow, cultivate, and extract the drugs from the plant. The definition of a monopoly does not necessarily have to do with the number of players, and that has been a misstatement that's been out there. It is the control of this market, and it is will be the state control of this market, and there will be barriers to entry. The fact that competition will be limited is in of itself a definition of what is a monopoly. And again, this is a monopoly that would be put into the Constitution permanent, I tell you, because it's not going to be undone by those who have spent the $20 million to get it into the Constitution. And so indeed, they are setting their own rules, they are establishing their own guidelines for who should be the commission. They don't have to go through the agency rulemaking process. So indeed, it is a monopoly, and frankly, the Supreme Court of Ohio has agreed that that language, which you will see on the ballot, is not misleading or deceptive.
You have a little over a minute to respond if you'd like to.
Well, I don't like to call Elizabeth a liar, but that was a doozy. The reality is that the commission actually controls, the Marijuana Control Commission controls the process. The seeds, the clones, the plants don't come from the growers, Elizabeth. You're reading fantasy into something that's just not there. It's a great line, and I know it resonates with some people, but it's just not true. The reality is that when it comes to this issue, we've waited for almost 19 years for the legislature to do anything. Anything. You're paying them to do something. I only get paid and Chris only gets paid because Mike's not doing his job. The folks over there aren't doing their job. 90% of Ohio voters want medical marijuana to be passed. 90%. That's the Quinnipiac poll. 60%, thereabouts, want adult personal use. People that are 21 and older to have the right to possess, grow, cultivate, consume marijuana. Now, you don't want that? That's fine. Pass a damn bill. Do something. But stop lying about this, one, and two, pass a bill that actually deals with reality.
Okay. Want to follow up with you. You said that Elizabeth was lying. What is the truth here?
You do not have to purchase your seeds or get your seeds or your clones, and Kurt doesn't either. Jan doesn't have to get, your pound of marijuana or be worried about selling it to anybody. You can get your seeds and your clones from wherever you get them today. You are not required, I don't know where you get your seeds or Jan gets her seeds, but you can find them on the internet. And ultimately, to suggest that, it's like some sort of Monsanto sort of, conspiracy that they've got to get their seeds from responsible Ohio growers is just absurd, and it's just not true. It doesn't say that in the amendment anywhere. I defy you to find it where it does.
In your read of the amendment, does it say that?
The growth and cultivation of marijuana and medicinal marijuana and the extraction of cannabinoids from marijuana and medical marijuana for sale and medical use within this state shall be lawful only at licensed MGCE facilities. And maybe Mr. James buys his from the illegal folks, which of course it is illegal, and maybe I think it is also said that you can continue probably to buy it from the black market once it becomes legal, because as Colorado has shown, the black market still continues to thrive once marijuana is legal.
Well, I want to move on to a question here for Responsible Ohio. In other states, there's been an application process to award marijuana cultivation licenses. So why should Ohioans skip that process and just hand over these licenses to these investors, most of whom have no experience in the cannabis industry and, some might suggest, have more interest in making money than seeing marijuana legalized?
I'll take that. Again, if the legislature was actually concerned about this, like most other legislatures that have dealt with marijuana legalization, they could actually auction off the licenses. That's what other states have done. They said, we're going to have this system in place. We're going to legalize marijuana. We're going to auction this off. New York State did that. They have 5 growers. Those 5 growers have 4 marijuana dispensaries per license. Most states actually limit the number of licenses so that the state can properly regulate the industry. But the only way to change the law in Ohio is you either work with the legislature that's failing to deal with this issue and has for 19 years, costing you $120 million a year to enforce that failure, or you put the issue before the voters by way of a constitutional amendment. The reason we put it in the Constitution is we don't trust the legislature, pure and simple. Why would you trust the legislature when they've failed so epically to deal with this issue? And now they're upset because they can't get their hands on the money from the issue. So we put this into the Constitution, and with a limited number that allows for the state to add licenses after year 4. Year 4 could be 11, Year 5, it can be 12, and so on and so forth. And, ultimately, somebody does have to pay for the amendment. In 2011, Peter Lewis, who's from Progressive Insurance, you may know him better with the Flo, the insurance saleswoman. But Peter was an advocate for marijuana, medical marijuana. In 2011, he came to our shop and said, how much is it going to cost to put an issue on the ballot for medical marijuana in Ohio? And we told him, and so did other groups tell him, and he ended up passing on Ohio. This is a multimillionaire who passed on Ohio. National groups have also passed on Ohio and said, Ohio's not going to be ready financially until about 2022, 2025. That's because it is so incredibly expensive. And what Mr. Curtin has done with issue 2 is to make it even more expensive, taking away your right to vote on issues, to give more power to the politicians, and make it more costly than ever to put an issue on the ballot. That's why.
I want to give Representative Curtin about 2 minutes to respond.
If one wants to get to the truth, if one wants to cast a truly informed vote on issue 3, there are 2 pieces of reading that one must complete. One is the prospectus that was circulated throughout 2014 to attract $40 million into this plan from start to finish. The other is the ballot language itself, 6,500 words of self-protection, the longest proposed amendment in Ohio's history, a 6,500-word business plan that does several things, including refuting something that Ian James just said. This would give these 10 landowners and their co-investors the opportunity for a permanent monopoly. How? One of the provisions, deep into the 6,500 words, allows these 10 landowners to acquire land around them, assuming they could find willing sellers. One would assume they could, because they would have every incentive to pay premium prices to continue growing. The state, through the Ohio Marijuana Control Commission, could only issue an 11th, a 12th, a 13th license beyond these 10 if it could prove that these 10 are not meeting the demand in regular supply-demand audits. These guys have formed an amendment to give themselves a monopoly in perpetuity. They wrote the rules. They're controlling the Ohio Marijuana Control Commission, not vice versa.
I want to ask you, again, a little bit more about what Ian has been talking about with regard to this is happening because state lawmakers have not done anything with regard to marijuana. I mean, your colleagues in the House and Senate seem very unlikely to pass any sort of medical marijuana bill. And now you even have groups like the Ohio Rights Group, who had been against the Responsible Ohio issue, now saying that they are coming out in support of it because it's the only hope they have, they feel, of getting marijuana legalized in Ohio. So why shouldn't those who want it now, especially those with desperate medical needs who are willing to take the chance, why shouldn't they vote for it?
Well, the Ohio Rights Group is in a distinct minority. Most of the folks who have been working for marijuana legalization for years and years in this state are formally on record in opposition to issue 3 because they're in opposition to a small group of monopolists controlling the action. As to polling, Ian likes to say that for 20 years plus, the legislature hasn't acted, and we got these polls showing that monumental numbers of people want legalization. Well, I'm an old pollster. I ran polls at the Columbus Dispatch for about 15 years, and what you get is based on how you ask the question. I can get any result you want based on how I ask the question. The truth is, if you look at Gallup, Harris, Roper, the true pollsters who have been doing this work for a long time, only within the past year or 2 has there been more than 50% of the public in valid polls tipping toward legalization. This has been coming for a long time. When I was in high school, it was 85% of the American public against legalization. Today, it's right in that 50-50 territory. So claiming that there's been this pent-up demand for 20 years is simply false.
Let me ask you about that, Responsible Ohio. The polls have been in that 50-50 range when you talk about legalizing marijuana. Not medical, but legalizing it overall.
Actually, it's now, I hate to disagree with my friend Mike, but let me, please. Quinnipiac, not a rinky-dink operation. 58% of Ohio voters supporting the personal adult use of marijuana.
But that was on the use of marijuana, not on issue 3.
Well, look, if you want to get into the issue 3, then Kent State University, not a rinky-dink college, 56% say they like issue 3. You know, if you want to get into what personal adult use is, Quinnipiac, Kent State, there are numerous reputable, I know they're not the dispatch mic, but reputable groups that have actually polled on this issue that have concluded that adults' personal use of people that are 21 and older, folks by and large, in majority, support that. Now, we will find out next Tuesday if our polling and the Kent State polling is right and we're going to win, or we're not. But, you know, I haven't seen a dispatch poll because they're not doing one.
Well, let me turn another question to you, and Chris, jump in anytime.
I'd love to.
The investors who own the 10 sites that will be specified in the Constitution are the ones who will benefit financially the most. I mean, I know you've talked about other businesses that could grow up around it, but certainly there's the ones that could benefit the most. So how can you assure us that this isn't just big marijuana, as the Rolling Stone article talked about? And if you haven't read the Rolling Stone article, Ian has some interesting things to say in that article.
I'm cleaning it up for this crowd.
The investors that we've heard about are not just fronts for out-of-state investors. There have been some questions about who these people are that we don't know about. Are you going to release a full list of everybody who's involved?
I believe Ian and his group have released a full list of who's involved and who's not involved. But, you know, I think that it is to Mike and others' advantage to focus, you know, political campaigns are about framing issues, right? And the folks that are the prohibitionists, the folks that don't want to change anything, have latched on to this notion that Issue 3 creates a monopoly. Now, I've done antitrust law for the last 10 years. It's not a monopoly, but lay that aside. I don't want to debate the monopoly or no monopoly, because what we end up doing is going in a circle. What everyone over on that side conveniently ignores is the fact that from a regulatory perspective, once you've ensured that the raw materials are safe for public consumption, this is a wide open market for anybody to be involved in. If you want to be a processor, if you want to create edibles, ointments, medicines, tinctures, you apply and you get an application and you're a license. If you want to sell at the retail level, you apply, you get a license. Now, there's been some misinformation about sort of pot shops on every corner more than Starbucks. That's a misreading of the amendment. The amendment creates a system of local democracy that says, look, we're going to do a precinct by precinct election. So if on a local democratic stage we decide in my precinct we don't want a pot shop, we will vote it down, just like what we do with liquor options here. But the cumulative effect of all of these opportunities amounts to 35,000 plus jobs and $550 million of tax revenues. Now, everyone wants to fight over the tax revenues, so cut it in half if you want. Cut it in half. That's 275, I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician, but that's close to $300 million in tax revenues that's going right to the local governments. And that's why you're seeing not the Statehouse politicians, but all these local politicians coming to us and saying, oh my gosh, this has to pass. We want pot for potholes. And there's a local, there's a local groundswell for that.
Okay. I want to give you an opportunity, about 2 minutes if you'd like to respond to that.
Local politicians clamoring for this is, I'm going to be charitable, far, far from the truth. Every organization representing local officials, the Ohio Township Association, the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, the Ohio Municipal League, up and down, you find a organization representing our elected officials, our cities, our townships, our counties. They're all lined up in opposition to Issue 3. They're on your sheet. There are 115 organizations on this sheet. This is as broad and deep a coalition as I have seen in my 40-plus years of covering and being involved in state and local politics. I have never seen this before, and the reason that they're all lined up in opposition to Issue 3 is because it does create a monopoly. It does create a permanent monopoly for 10 individuals and their co-investors, and it's a prostitution of the Ohio Constitution to do this.
I want to ask you also about that coalition that you're just referencing there. This campaign includes some of the biggest and best-known groups and politicians in the state. Why haven't you been able to raise huge sums of money to go up against Responsible Ohio and Issue 3?
Because when you have a coalition like this, you don't need $40 million. The truth will prevail.
You're confident, even though polls are showing that maybe there's a tipping point here?
I feel very good about our chances on Tuesday.
All right. I want to move back. We're getting to the point where we're going to start taking audience questions here. But I want to move back over and ask you folks from Responsible Ohio one more question. The amendment sets tax rates in the Ohio Constitution. So these are the investors. They're being allowed to set the tax rates. How is that a good idea? And when you put tax rates in the Constitution, you have to take it back to the voters to change those rates. So how is that a good idea?
We have to be cognizant of the fact that investors aren't putting tax rates into the Constitution. We're having a vote on Tuesday to decide whether that's a good idea or not. And if folks believe that it's not a good idea, investors or Ohioans won't be putting anything into the Constitution. That's the great thing about democracy. That's the thing that the General Assembly didn't understand when they went and put issue 2 on the ballot. Look, we've done a significant amount of economic modeling, mindful of what went on in Washington and Colorado, where they set their tax rates too high and couldn't outpace the black market. When our economic modeling is optimized, it shows that effective tax rate, that effective rate of 22.5%, is ideal for allowing these folks to compete with the black market. Folks talk about, well, this is a cartel and they're going to set prices. That's a ludicrous failure to understand basic economic principles. Because not only will these 10 growers and these thousands and thousands of retailers and processing shops and testing facilities be competing with one another, they'll be competing with a black market that's out to underprice them. We're going to have pricing in real time that's going to reflect supply and demand, competition.
I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to respond.
If these 10 landowners and their co-investors thought they were buying into a plan that would create true competition, they would not have ponied up $40 million to corner the market on this commodity. It's that simple.
All right. Well, you didn't need a minute and a half there. I want to ask the Ohioans Against Marijuana Monopolies a question. We've heard a lot of discussion about medical marijuana, and I know you've said that this is about more than medical marijuana. But if Ohio doesn't legalize marijuana for medical research, doesn't that hurt the state as it strives to become a hub for medical research around the country?
Well, that's an interesting question because does it hurt Ohio? Well, I'm not sure it hurts Ohio. It probably hurts Ohio more in order to have something become a medicine when the FDA hasn't approved it. To think that we're going to just completely ignore a federal process we have in place that makes sure that frankly will make sure that all side effects are disclosed is amazing to me. Instead of having, the child-proof bottle of medicine, instead we're going to have gummy bears and brownies and lollipops that are going to be used out there for medicinal purposes. And so that in and of itself should cause people to step back and say, wait a minute, this is not the way that we allow our medicine to be put out there. And again, the science is not there. And for this to be fully disclosed to people, there needs to be further research. And the FDA already has clinical trials out there. So there shouldn't be a rush to put this out there as a medicine. In fact, it will do more harm.
Give you about a minute and a half to respond.
Oh my dear God, there's not been a rush. We've waited for 19 years for the legislature to do anything on this issue. So to suggest that we're rushing is just a complete abdication of fact. Come on. This is the kind of the reefer madness that you should expect from that side. That's what we're dealing with here, folks. 40 years of testing has gone on from the federal government's perspective. Do you know that the federal government actually grows marijuana at the University of Mississippi? And there are people that actually get a tin of marijuana on the regular, as the kids say, every month of about 300 joints. On the side of that tin, it says, here's the amount of marijuana you need to consume for your illness. The federal government's been studying marijuana for 40 years. Don't kid yourself and don't believe this crap about we've got to wait for the FDA to do something. Look, the FDA is not going to do anything until the state governments continue to say, hey, look, you know what? We want to care for our people. We believe that people need to have compassionate care that marijuana provides, and if you're not going to do it, federal government or state government, we the people will.
Let me just point out that there are 10 pharmaceutical drugs that are based on cannabis, and in many of the tests that have been done over time, they found that there was no medicinal effect.
Yeah, let me also point out that, you know, we actually sell something that's not even on a schedule at all, and it could actually kill you and your kids. And if you give your kids $5, they can run down the convenience store and pick it up. You know what it's called? Aspirin. Your kid takes 20 pills, and they can bleed to death on the kitchen floor.
Okay. Before we get to audience questions, I have one more quick question I want to ask you. The amendment allows for expansion if demand calls for it, but it also says that the commission would determine that expansion is warranted, may issue a license for an additional MGCE facility at a site other than has been designated herein, but it may not, right? I mean, more facilities could be designated at the initial sites, which means that the original investors in the 10 sites are the only ones that'll benefit, right?
I have a hard time believing that a commission would reissue a license to an existing owner who's failed to follow the rules and regulations. I can't conceive of that being
Couldn't
something.
they expand on their site?
The commission could issue additional licenses. That's the debate we've been having. Like I said, have a hard time believing that a commission over there at the Statehouse, handpicked by Governor Kasich, would give additional licenses to the folks that put this amendment on the ballot to begin with. I can't conceive of that.
It's absurd.
All right, and finally, we have audience questions coming up here, but I want to ask both of you this final thought. What happens if issues 2 and 3 both pass? So let me ask you.
Highly unlikely, but in the unlikely event it would happen, we have clear language in Article 2 of the Ohio Constitution that states when conflicting amendments are both approved by the electorate in the same election, the issue receiving the most affirmative votes shall become the law. We also have one case law from 1918 when that actually happened, when 2 competing amendments relative to the taxation of real property contradicted each other, went straight to the Ohio Supreme Court, and in January 1919 in the Greenlund case, for your lawyers out there, Greenlund, Greenlund case, the court ruled that all other matters are extraneous. The only thing that matters is the clear language of the Constitution. This issue trumps that one, and I think the same thing would prevail this time around.
30 seconds.
Book it. This is probably the first time that Mike and I will have agreed in a long time. But that assumes that there's actually a direct conflict. But in fact, within the 18th version of this House Joint Resolution, and I don't even think they got the joke with that, in fact, you just did, that it doesn't have a direct conflict because they screwed up. They were trying to be too cute by half, spending 19 years not to deal with something and then trying to spend 10 days to stop medical marijuana. They became too cute by half, but we'll see. I doubt that issue 2 wins based on the polling, so I don't think we're going to have to worry about a court
Well,
case.
the Ohio State Bar Association thinks we got it right, and that's why they endorsed issue 2.
Okay. It is now time to turn it over to audience questions here, which is Columbus Metropolitan Club's tradition. Today's questions were written in advance, selected by members of the Metropolitan Club Program Committee for appropriateness and balance. So let's proceed with the first question.
I'm Carol Looper, and I'm asking a question written by Trip Lazarus. Since our gerrymandered legislature is extremely unlikely to approve legalization of marijuana, what other avenues besides amending the Constitution do citizens have?
I'll give both sides a chance to respond. Go right ahead.
Well, Ohio is fortunate. We're among the relative handful of states, 14 states, that offer its citizens both the constitutional initiative and the statutory initiative. These guys could have chosen the statutory initiative and completely bypassed the General Assembly. You don't have to wait for the legislature to act. You could have done what the Ohio Lung Association did in 2006 and qualify an initiated statute to amend the Ohio Revised Code to bring clean air to Ohio. They could have proposed an initiated statute to amend the Ohio Revised Code to simply legalize medicinal and/or recreational marijuana. They chose not to do that. Why? Because you can't embed a constitutional monopoly for yourself if you just do it by state statute. That avenue's there. They didn't choose it. It would have been the honest route to go. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be on the stage today if they had chosen that route. When you choose to amend the Constitution, though, to grant yourself a complete and permanent monopoly in perpetuity, that's why I'm on this stage.
We have about 50 seconds.
So, it's funny, Mike, you talk about it's like the Magna Carta. It's not the Magna Carta, it's the state constitution. In the state constitution, we have livestock, we have gambling, we have bonds that have been issued to people that used to pay you. We have a number of things in there that slavery's in there, and so is a marriage ban. It's not the Magna Carta. We put this in the Constitution because we don't trust the Statehouse. Because if we put it into law through the initiated statute, the reality is the very next day, the folks that have failed to deal with marijuana legalization and reform and dealing with the compassionate care for the chronically ill could immediately repeal the law. Because that's the way the process works.
It's never happened in the history of our state.
Well, you know what, Mike? It may not have, you've never passed any sort of medical marijuana bill either, but I don't know that it would keep you from repealing it.
Okay.
An initiated
Let's move-
statute's never
let's
been
move on.
repealed.
Let's move on.
Okay. I'm Alec Andrews, and I have a question from Randy Best. If issue 3 is passed, I understand that approximately 1,159 retail locations will be allowed to open in the state of Ohio. This is based on population, I believe. Where did this population to location ratio come from, and how was it derived?
And obviously, we'll ask Responsible Ohio that.
Chris's brain.
Not my brain. We wanted to come up with a way to ensure that there was access, through the proper supply and demand channels. Although we were concerned of Mike's characterization that there would be a pot store on every corner, and so we put 2 safeguards in there. The first safeguard was to say, all right, look, we're not going to let, no matter what happens, even if every single Ohioan votes yes in every local election, we're still not going to let the number of retail stores rise above, 1 per 10,000, which ends up being 1,150, so excuse me. But the most important thing there is we made certain that to the extent, and we talked about this earlier, that to the extent that there would be a retail store in a locale, that locale is going to have the opportunity to do an up or down vote. Yes, we want this here. No, we don't want this here. It's up to the locals. It's not up to the amendment. It's not up to the commission. It's not up to anybody but the locals.
Would you like a minute to respond?
It's up to the locals from the standpoint of voting in determining whether to have a store in a precinct. But it is also written into the proposed constitutional amendment that a city or a county cannot zone in order to prohibit all retail establishments. So right there, they have written into the Constitution, tried to write into the Constitution, the fact that it cannot be zoned out.
It can be voted out. You can vote no. I mean, in theory, we could have 0 retail shops under this amendment. 0.
Precinct by precinct, but that's not going to happen.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
My name's Tim Sword with Greater Columbus Sister Cities. My question is from Richard Adis. What happens if issue 3 passes and sometime down the road, marijuana is legalized on the federal level? Will federal law simply overrule the constitutional amendment?
Go right ahead.
I have a stab at that. I mean, this is now we're getting into levels of speculation, but depending on how the federal government does this, and I don't mean to get pointy-headed legalese on you, but depending on how the federal government does this, this could be a Commerce Clause issue that says, all right, now Indiana pot shops can flood Ohio markets with marijuana, rendering the 10 grow facilities irrelevant. So if the federal government legalizes, there's an argument out there that says the entire debate that we've been having is irrelevant.
If I could just respond, I think the point there is it is unknown as to what would happen, but what we're going to have in the Constitution is this monopoly that creates barriers to entry. So that is going to be the problem, and so we're creating that problem.
One more question.
Yes, my name is Kermit Whitfield, and I'm asking a question on behalf of Anue Patel, MD. And the question is, and this may cover a little bit of ground that you've already talked about, why does Ohio need to pass a bill when the FDA is likely to approve a medication studied and tested within 1 to 2 years?
Go ahead, Responsible Ohio.
Well, right now you've got a pill that costs a patient $1,200 a month to buy. It's got marijuana in it, and I'm not sure that anybody, you've heard now wait for the FDA to actually act and do something on this, when we know that the federal government's waited for 40 years and worked on it for 40 years. People need help now. I don't believe that you're going to see a lot of action from the FDA. This constant refrain of let's just wait it out a little bit longer, let's keep waiting. There are people that are sick and are dying, that have kids that have moved away from Colorado. Addison Benton, as Chris has mentioned, moved away from Colorado. They didn't want to wait any longer for their child to continue to suffer. They moved. If that's going to be our solution, is just wait, a little bit longer. The FDA is a bureaucracy like the Statehouse. I'm not sure that you're going to want to put all your faith in the federal government or the state government to wait.
Would you like a minute to respond?
More than 2 years ago, in the summer of 2013, the FDA began approving clinical trials on CBD oils, cannabis-based medicines, for application in certain types of cases. Those are moving forward the way they should. Rigorous, peer-reviewed clinical research trials with real physicians and real scientists doing real research. This is not going to come from these 10 guys at these 10 locations. I've given you 2 pieces of required reading, the amendment itself and the prospectus, which you can find if you Google Responsible Ohio Prospectus, it will pop up. Other thing I would suggest you read is the current edition of New Republic magazine. For you good progressives out there, the New Republic, November 2015 issue. The article is titled "The Wonder Drug, the Medical Marijuana Industry's Latest Trend" by Elizabeth Bruenig, B-R-U-E-N-I-G, who happens to be an epileptic herself and has more than a journalistic interest in this topic, has a very personal interest, and she exposes a lot of this hype and hucksterism for what it is.
Homework. So let's turn to another question.
This is a question written by Bill Oberdick. This is a complicated issue. How can I be confident in voting for issue 3 when all the major newspapers in Ohio, both right-leaning and left-leaning, have come out against issue 3?
That seems a good question for Responsible Ohio.
Yeah, especially if you have a subscription to the newspaper, which not a lot of people do anymore. Right or wrong or different, I'm not casting aspersions too far. Look, this is about making up your own mind. You can decide whether or not you want to support this or not. If you need the editorial pages to tell you how to vote, do so. But there's ample information out there. Mike's given you 2 pieces of information. I would suggest you also go to yeson3ohio.com, educate yourself about this. I would also suggest that you do a little Googling around to talk to other and learn about medical marijuana. And learn about what's happening in Colorado. The reality is Colorado is not some hellscape that's opened up to some dastardly world. They actually have a great economy. Their housing market is booming. Their employment market is booming. About 200,000 more people have moved there since they legalized. It's not the gates of hell.
Is it because they legalized?
I think there's probably a good indication there that it's either people that are refugees escaping their state so their kids can have medicine, but I think it's also the fact that there's a quality of life that comes along with this. It's not just about medical marijuana or marijuana legalization, but it's not leading to the rack and ruin that Michael would suggest would occur if you had a yes on 3 and a no on 2.
Would you like a few minute 30 to respond?
I'll take half of it and get Elizabeth half of it. I've seen many firsts in this campaign. One of the firsts I just witnessed this past week was the Ohio State University College Democrats and the Ohio State University College Republicans, both agreeing on vote no on 3. This coalition of interest isn't just newspapers. This is virtually every professional association in the state, every mental health issue organization in the state, every education organization in the state, child welfare organization in the state, a lot of labor organizations, certainly all of law enforcement, faith, agriculture, local government, civic, political. I've never seen anything like it. That's why issue 3 is going down and probably big, and I'll see the rest of my time to Elizabeth.
And in fact, I'm sure there are some successes in Colorado, but there are also some tragic failures. There is a 32% increase in marijuana-related traffic deaths from the year just 2013. Driving under the influence of marijuana is up. Marijuana use by children is up. ER visits are up. Poison control calls are up. This is all recorded in report Marijuana Commercialization Failing in Colorado, which talks about the Rocky Mountain high-intensity drug trafficking area report, and it's all there, all the statistics. So it's not, it is a complicated matter, I should say. It's not an easy matter.
Okay. Move on to another question.
One question from Deb Peluso, which may be of interest to others in the audience. How do I become an investor if the marijuana ballot issue passes?
Go right ahead.
Sure, yeah. You actually have an opportunity to own and operate your own retail store. You'll have to pull an application from the Marijuana Control Commission. You'll have to seek the vote of the voters in a precinct. You'll have to win that support from a majority, and you'll have to pay $10,000, pass a criminal background check, and you'll be able to own and operate your own retail stores. You'll
What about
also
being
be
an
able. You also
investor?
be able to. There is an artesian grow component to this that the Ohio Rights Group has been working with growers on to make sure that those folks that want to be, kind of a craft brewer, you can be a craft grower in this whole process and work within the boundaries of the law and the constitutional amendment to do so.
But being an investor, at this, the investor slots have been sold out.
At this point, we've had to go through a Securities Exchange Commission process. Anybody that invests has to be, not to get too nerdy on this thing, but you have to be an accredited investor.
And just before we get to closing statements, anything you'd like to add? Elizabeth? Mike?
How to become an investor? No. I think that probably your money can be better spent elsewhere.
All right. Well, it's time for 1 minute of closing statements, and I believe since you folks went first, you get to go first again, Responsible Ohio, and then Ohioans Against Marijuana Monopolies. So go right ahead with 1 minute.
It's really simple, folks. We've spent 19 years waiting for the legislature to do anything on marijuana reform. If you want something that's going to be different than what we have today, you're going to wait for another decade before anything happens. That's a reality. The folks across the street have no interest in passing any sort of marijuana reform whatsoever. If they did, they would have passed House Bill 33, which sits before them today. House Bill 33 is not a complex bill. It's a simple epileptic medical marijuana bill, and it's got 9 co-sponsors. It's going nowhere like every other House bill and Senate bill has gone. It's going to sit there and die. It's not moving. And that's because there's no will to do so. The gerrymandering has ensured it. We've had 800,000 people sign petitions, nearly 800,000, to put this issue before the voters. We registered about 155,000 people to vote in the state of Ohio. I know what I believe. I believe that a no on 2 and a yes on 3 will cure something at the Statehouse. It's called chronic hypocrisy.
1 minute for closing statements from Ohioans Against Marijuana Monopolies.
Well, in fact, it is not simple. And in fact, we've heard today that certain things are being debated about what this proposed amendment means. And we heard Mr. Stock say that, well, it may be hard to believe that something could happen. That's the point. We, the citizens, should not allow private, wealthy investors to write their own business plan, their own business scheme into the Constitution. The Constitution, the Ohio Constitution, may not be the Magna Carta, but it is the people's document, and it sets forth your rights and privileges and should not be hijacked for this purpose. And don't be fooled, because there is no mandate for medical marijuana in this proposed amendment. Why are all of these folks, these medical experts, I haven't heard any medical experts on the other side, why are they all against this? Medical professionals are all about treating and caring for patients. If it were that good, they'd be behind it. So the Ohio Constitution is for all members. It's for all members of the public.
All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your questions. It's been a great discussion.
I hope you enjoyed today's forum. Remember that you can view and share all of the forums on CTV, Columbus Television, and WOSU, and PBS affiliates statewide. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Hannah News and the Ohio Farm Bureau, as well as our speakers. Thank you for coming.